How we choreograph a robot and how it moves is going to be table stakes when it comes to people accepting and feeling safe around these tools.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Human Pulse podcast, where we talk about living well with technology. I'm Fabrice Newman, a tech consultant for small businesses.
And I'm Ann Traeger, a human potential and performance coach.
This is episode 38, recorded on June 21st, 2026.
Human Pulse is usually never longer than 30 minutes, so let's get started.
So Anne, first of all, I want to make sure that people understand that it is you, even with your raspy voice. You're still fighting a little illness here, but you're doing fine.
Yes, it is me. I don't know, maybe we're going to have to feed this into 11 Labs and have it be my permanent voice. I don't know, we'll get the audience to vote.
Yeah, let's not.
Okay.
Let's keep going. This quote you just said was taken from the Inner Cosmos podcast hosted by David Eagleman in its episode 156. His guest was Catie Cuan, who has this particularity of being a dancer and choreographer in addition to being a roboticist. As David Eagleman describes, Catie Cuan is an expert on the strange social interface between humans and machines, and she's gotten there by dancing with robots. Incredible. So why don't you tell us more about this and why it tickled your interest in the first place?
Well, as you know, I'm really, really fascinated by the human machine that we are, by how we evolve in this crazy world around us. And so Catie Cuan is speaking my language when she talks about, how movement has always been the primary way human brains evaluate intentions and threats of other people and of other things in the world around us. Okay. And she points out that, early human society used collective movement like dancing to foster intersocial bonding and to coordinate large groups for hunting and to prepare for war. So, when I was listening to this and thinking about it afterwards, I was reminded of the New Zealand rugby team, the All Blacks, and their pre-game Hakka ritual. So it's a Maori ceremonial performance that involves chanting and stamping and body slapping and strong gestures and like these really intense facial expressions. It's just beautiful. Okay. And so in the All Black context, it works as, as a challenge, and they declare their identity and a team unity ritual. Okay. It's a starting point for the match. So historically, the Hakka could be used, for challenging and in battle preparation, okay, which is, sort of the transposition to the rugby games now. But it was also used for welcoming guests and for marking grief and for honoring people and for celebrating achievement and for expressing collective feeling. So for me, it really embodies this whole idea that Catie Cuan is bringing up. And the other thing about Hakka is that the facial expressions really, really matter. So the wide eyes and the protruding tongue and the stamping and the chest slaps, and all that synchronized movement is part of what gives force and meaning to the message. So, it shows intensity, and it shows unity, and it shows courage, and it shows readiness. So this, for me, is a ritual that really highlights pretty much what we humans do in a day-to-day, if we pay attention, okay? I mean, we are constantly scanning the people around us unconsciously, or more or less unconsciously, probably more unconsciously than less unconsciously. And our brains are, as Cuan says, movement recording machines. So we're really, really finely tuned to decoding, something else's speed and their hesitancy and the rhythm and the posture in order to figure out what that other entity is feeling or planning or thinking. And, we give it names like emotional intelligence and situational, awareness. And we do it all the time. And we are all capable of this. And it is truly a superpower. So, I don't need to say anything, for example, when I pound on my desk, because you know exactly what it means about the frustration that I have in the face of my computer device, right?
Yeah, I do know that. And please don't do that with the mic on.
And I do kind of wish my device could read that gesture and fix itself immediately. I mean, when will this happen, right?
Well,
Hear me, Siri, that, so that like you do something about that.
Actually, it makes me think of something, because it does exist in the way of when you do something on your iPhone and you mistype something, or you cut and paste something, you can actually shake the device, which is the equivalent of the undo.
Oh,
on a computer,
right. Okay, which is like a totally natural thing for me to,
well,
to
no,
shake.
and every time I talk about this feature to people, I say, please hold your phone very tightly, because and it also works on the iPad, and it's like okay, and every time I talk about that, I do the introduction of, so I'm going to show you something. Please hold on very tightly on the device. But if you shake it this way, then it's the equivalent of the undo thing. And there was the equivalent on Android as well. I think, I'm not sure it still exists. But it was when you're on a beta version of a software. If you shake, it means that something didn't work properly, or you want to send a feedback. So, and that's exactly what it is. Basically, it's like, okay, I'm angry about something because it doesn't work. So, why doesn't it work? And all of a sudden, oh, well, so tell us what's happening. We're here to help.
Okay, so this is kind of a very primitive version of robots being able to read us.
No joke.
Okay. However, what Cuan is talking about is something different, which is about us being able to read robots.
Yes. Absolutely. And listening to the whole thing for me was fascinating also. Two things came to mind. First, and I know I talked about him already in the last episode. Okay. But once
you're
again.
a fanboy. You're a fanboy.
I know, I am. But it made me think of Isaac Asimov, the science fiction writer. He wrote things in the 1940s, 50s, 60s. And obviously, Catie Cuan made me think of the character Susan Calvin, who in the books and stories is a robo-psychologist. And I thought it was fascinating that he thought of someone who would try to interact with robots with human and mathematical tools in equal manner, right? Because this is what she does. And this is what we are already trying to do today. And we hear people at Anthropic talking about Claude as being some kind of being, not human being, but some kind of being that they don't comprehend totally, which is also fascinating. And the second thought, probably more attuned to our world today, is linked to the research around world models compared to what we can now call traditional LLMs. And I want to try to explain it, the difference, as simply as possible. So it goes like this. As we know, LLMs are generative text-centric engines. So basically, they break down text and images and audio into what's called discrete tokens, so like a unit, and they try to predict the most statistically probable next token based on their training data. So we are now used to using those, and we know, and we have to never forget that they are just statistical machines. Right? A world model is designed to learn the internal dynamics of an environment. So instead of predicting words, it builds an internal abstract simulation of how the world works, trying to track how an initial state changes when a specific action is applied. So it's an intricate way of saying that if you look at a cup, you know that by extending your arm and hand, you can take it.
Right. Because you have that external context.
Exactly. So trying to give another example, if you ask an LLM what happens when you drop a glass of water, it will search its database to find words that commonly appear after dropped glass.
Okay.
And then it will give you an answer saying the glass will shatter and water will spill. Whereas a world model will have watched, quote unquote, thousands of hours of videos showing how objects interact. It will build an internal simulation of the physical world, which means that basically the world model will try to act as a human brain acts. It will calculate the trajectory and the impact and the fluid dynamics of the water all in one quote unquote thought. And obviously the LLM has no idea what it is. It's just like a string of words. So it brings Yann LeCun. So this guy is a French scientist. He used to work at Meta and left Meta for, I would say, obvious reasons. And he would describe LLMs as book smart and world models as street smart. And I thought it's very interesting. And he's also very, very harsh on LLMs because basically he says, we know we are spending so many billions of dollars on LLMs, which is for him already a technology of the past. And to me, that relates exactly to the topic at hand, which is like dancing with robots, as you mentioned with the Catie Cuan. In order for us to be able to interact with robots without fearing them, the robots have to be street smart. Meaning that they have to give us social cues in addition to mechanical cues. And it's so very hard. I mean, we never think about it. And you mentioned that before, like how naturally we do things. For example, if I tell you, please go get me something to drink, you don't need more information than that to, if you're so willing, go, for example, to the kitchen, open the fridge, find a bottle of something I would like because open the bottle, take a glass, pour something in the glass, put the bottle back in the fridge, and so on and so forth. It's a very complex succession of tasks.
Negotiate what I get in exchange and,
Exactly. So we handle that with ease as humans, but like for a robot to do the same, my goodness, we are so far from it, so it seems.
Yeah, well, and we're far from a whole lot of other things because what Catie Cuan says is that she talks about how for all of these millions of years, almost anything that moved autonomously on its own. I know I repeated myself by saying autonomously and on its own, but really when you think about a robot doing that, it's so extraordinary, okay? Because prior to this, it was always part of nature. It was an animal or a plant or the weather or something, it was something that existed without us making it. So today, robots represent this completely new category of movement, which also makes them different than the LLMs, okay? And we don't have thousands of years of evolutionary history to understand them, okay, their movement, okay? So what she's proposing is that we actually have to give these robots social cues so that they can so that we can actually understand them, because otherwise we're just going to freak out. So anyway, this whole idea of how we interact with the other, that is something that is completely other as a robot is, or an LLM is so completely interesting. Okay, I was listening to a French psychiatrist named Serge Tisserand, and he was recently interviewed by on a French podcast called La Conversation Scientifique by Etienne Klein. And so this psychiatrist reminds us how for the longest time, similarly to what we were just talking about, movement, voice was considered by human beings to be a uniquely human property. Like, this is what made us humans. And in fact, in 1878, when Edison's phonograph was presented to the French Académie des Sciences, the audience was freaked out by the machine's ability to play back a human voice. And several of the scientists there, called it a fraud, and they talked about ventriloquism, and they were saying, there must be some little human back there doing it. Which, by the way, with robots right now, the robots that go clean your house, there actually is a human in the background going to clean your house. So let's not. So anyway, that's just a weird parallel. Okay. Anyway, of course, once everyone got over the idea that this was impossible, as the French would say, Then there was like this huge enthusiasm for the phonograph, okay, right? So we have an adaptation period. And so the fact that LLMs can speak to us has really helped us to think about them like humans. So again, if we go back to the movement, if we can get them to move like humans and with similar eye movements and so forth, then maybe we'll accept them more easily. So, and the reason that I talk about that, I bring that up about thinking of them like humans is because Tisserand also explains that we humans have this very, very natural evolutionary tendency towards, and this is a word for you, Fabrice, anthropomorphism.
As we all know, yes. We'll try not to say it today.
And it allows, so anthropomorphism is what allows us to organize our relationships with things that are unknown to us, okay? So if you see, an animal or a new tool, we start by treating them as if they were human, okay? By speaking to it or by touching the new object to see how it reacts. And then what we do is we use a human-centric template to understand the behavior. This is the way our brain functions. And then the next step is that we actually attribute human-like qualities to non-human entities, okay? Whether it's your dog, who you actually think loves you, or our cat, who I'm always saying, oh, you love me, and let's have a little cat love time and all of that, when all it wants is to eat, okay? Yes. So, and I know that, but I don't want to know that. Okay. Anyway, but we can do the same thing with AI. And what this does is it facilitates communication with something that is non-human.
Well, in that regard, I have to say that it seems we don't need help, external help to anthropomorphize, right? And so this whole discussion of having robots being better at communicating our ways might be not that essential because we can anthropomorphize without them?
Possibly. Yeah, possibly. What I'm seeing, if we summarize this, we decode the world through language. We decode it through voice. Okay.
Yep.
And we decode it through movement, as Cuan highlights. And she highlights that intelligence isn't purely cognitive, like a cognitive text-based problem. She says it's embodied. And that true interaction and emotional connection, and this is what we're talking about, it goes above one level of just adapting to the machine, okay? It goes to interaction and emotional connection. And those are derived from things that are somatic, that are in the body, that are physical, that are kinesthetic experiences. And so what she's proposing is to actually, or what I understood at least, is to get robots to perform differently, to perform in a way that allows us to have a different kind of relationship with them. And, currently what robots do is that they can, for example, reach for an object without looking at it. Whenever, what humans are looking for is what the eyes are doing. And so it is actually really freaky for us to see that. It's just creepy. It's like zombie-like. It's what people call the uncanny valley effect. Which means that we're going to not like those robots so much, okay? If it's too freaky, we're just unconsciously not going to like it.
Yeah, but so that's the thing. So you were talking about adaptation, and maybe one way to look at it is also to wait for us to adapt, right? Because at some point, so the example you're referring to is that, during the podcast, I think they are sitting in armchairs, and there's a table in between them during the conversation. And she does something. She reaches for the bottle on the table without looking at it, and asks David Eagleman how he reacts to that, and said, "Yeah, it's weird because I'm expecting you to actually draw your attention to the bottle before reaching for it, because this is what we do." And what you were saying is that robots, most of them have sensors that give them 360-degree possible view around them, so they can see everything. They don't need to turn their head to actually go for an object that's reachable. And made me laugh also because Eagleman actually also remembers watching or maybe rewatching the Terminator, the movie, and we know it's it's a robot, but in a humanoid form, and this robot actually looks around all the time with his two eyes, and it says, this is how you see science fiction movies or books getting older, because at that time they didn't think about the possibility that this robot could do something without his just two eyes.
Yeah,
he could have other
sensors all over the places. Yeah,
right. And so that was also very interesting. But what you're describing also, this autonomous car thing, it's another kind of robot, obviously. They're not only humanoid robots. And they describe, and she lives in the San Francisco area, and so they have lots of Waymo taxis, self-driving taxis there. And there's something very interesting when here, with normal driver cars or drivers in cars, you go to, as a pedestrian, you go to for crossing the street. And before going, more often than not, you look for the driver's eyes to make sure that they see you before you cross, so to cross safely. But what do you do with a self-driving car? There's no driver in the driver's seat, right? And so they actually added something to the car. I haven't seen it, but they describe it as a signal that the car can actually give the pedestrians that, yes, I saw you, I stopped, you can go and cross the street. So obviously, us as human beings, we need those external signals to make sure that we are safe. The more we talk about it, the more I think as well that we often said here that, so one of the main differences between today and 100 years ago is that the changes are getting so much faster. But maybe after some time, we'll get used to have robots doing things without actually giving us any social cues.
Well, yeah, potentially. And then why make it on us to adapt to the robots? Why not make the robots adapt to us? Okay. I mean, come on. And I think that's what I'm taking away from, her work, is that she says, well, let's make it easier for us to adapt to these robots by giving them so that they don't freak us out right away. I mean, first of all, for marketing reasons, it makes sense not to have a whole tool that freaks you out. Okay, whatever form it takes, whether it's a car. I mean, what you describe with autonomous cars is exactly the kind of thing I believe she's talking about. Is that giving those cues? Okay, however you give those cues, so that we can dance with them rather than being freaked out and then frozen in the headlights and then thinking, oh my God, I have to adapt. It's just on the principle of it. Okay.
Well, yeah. I also think it's basically also the whole history of technology and computers. For example, we started with text-based interfaces, and then thank you, whoever, we got to graphical interfaces with keyboard and mouse. It's way better. And then now we are getting into voice, and this brings us back to the world models. Basically, what we do as humans is that we don't only talk or only see or only touch or only smell or only feel. We do that at the same time.
Yeah.
Always, all the time. And this is, I think, basically what she says, Catie Cuan, also, that if we give the possibility to the robots to do that, and maybe basing them on world models as described before, then their interactions with us will be more natural, even if it's just mechanical, and that will help us being more at ease with them.
Yeah, and she talks about it as being actually kind of important because of the demographic changes in the world, and how, there are going to be a whole lot more older people who need help and care, and a whole lot fewer younger people to actually do that, which means that we're going to need robots that people are going to be comfortable with.
Yeah, I think that's the whole premise of it. Yes, exactly. And we're going to need them.
Yeah, and there's this thing that you just brought up, which is how we always do several things at once, and we do it more or less unconsciously. And I was watching a YouTube video by Joanna Stern this morning about her experience using the new Siri for a week. And what struck me, because I was also thinking about this podcast that we were going to do today about movement is how every time she spoke to Siri, she would hold the phone up and speak and look at it and speak to it. Okay. Yes. And now maybe she's doing that as in order to show, to have something to show people who are watching the video. It could be a movie technique. And she does it because she knows that the audience will then get that she's actually speaking to another entity and so on and so forth. I mean, it was a perfect example of that. And how many people do you see, hold up their phone and, whatever to speak to it near their mouth? And you don't have to do that.
No. But don't start me on this. This is a whole other kind of worms because, why do people do that? And
because this is what we do. Because this is how we interact with the world, with movement, and we are embodied beings. Okay, that's it. And a robot. I mean, an LLM is definitely not embodied, and a robot, well, maybe it will end up ultimately being embodied in its, whatever body shape it is in. I don't know.
On that note, and that's it for episode 38. Thank you all for joining us. Visit humanpulsepodcast.com for links in past episodes.
Thank you also for subscribing and reviewing wherever it is you listen to your podcasts. It really helps other people to find us. And please, I invite you to share this with anyone around you who might find it interesting.
And we'll see you in more or less 2 weeks.
Bye, everyone.